Welcome back, people. Now, Liz Truss's flagship trade deal with India is reportedly on the rocks after Indian ministers reacted angrily to Suella Braverman criticising migrants from their country. Well, she didn't really criticise them, but anyway. The Home Secretary expressed her reservations about the trade deal last week, as she said that it would increase migration to the UK and that Indians represented the largest group of visa overstayers. So it's not migrants, it's visa overstayers that she was criticising. But the Indian government sources said that the relationship has taken a step back following Braverman's statements. Joining me now is the CEO of Compesair and international trade advisor is Shanker Singham, who's recently released a report on the free trade agreement between India and the UK. First things first, how damaging would it be to both India and the UK if a trade deal between the two countries was binned off because our actual Home Secretary criticised people who outstay their visa?
Well, I think there is a possibility that the UK and India could actually do a comprehensive free trade agreement, and lots of countries have been trying to do this. The US and the EU have tried for decades to get a comprehensive deal with India. The deal that Australia and the UAE did with India is quite superficial. So I think there is actually quite a lot at stake here, and the benefits to UK financial services firms, legal services firms. You know, we have a big issue with Scotch whisky taxes and tariffs in India. So there's quite a lot that we could get from this deal, but I think the Home Secretary's comments were need to be understood in the context of what you're talking about with the trade deal is not immigration per se. It's not sort of what most people think about when they think about immigration. It's about what's called mode 4 services, which is movement of business people to, so somebody wants to go and visit their factory in the UK and they want to come for 2 weeks to visit and then go back. It's that kind of thing more so. There's some issues around.
She was talking about people who overstay. She's talking about people who overstay, right? So is illegal.
So that is illegal anyway, and the Indians do have an obligation to take back those people who are illegally in the UK, and that agreement is a separate agreement that the Indians need to keep their side of the bargain on that. So on the trade side, it's just things like mobility for these temporary business workers and some student visas and so on. But the Indians will certainly have to accept the people who have overstayed, who need to be returned to India, and that will be part of the overall the overall bargain and the overall package here.
Is it not a bit embarrassing for India, the way that I see it anyway, which is that they've thrown their toys out the pram because our Home Secretary, whose job it is to secure our country, has just come out and stated a fact, which is that, she's privy to the facts. I've not really got them to hand. She's the Home Secretary, of course, but one would assume that she's telling the truth when she says the largest group of overstayers are from India, right? I mean, realistically, isn't it a bit pathetic for the Indian government to potentially biff an entire trade deal because our Home Secretary says, shock horror, I'm not in favour of people overstaying their visa?
Yeah, and it's important to understand what she didn't say. She didn't say that she was going to stand in the way of mode 4 services, temporary movement, temporary business permits, that kind of thing. She didn't say she was going to stand in the way of student visas. She focused her comments on, as you say, on the overstayers and the people who are here illegally. And India knows that they have to move on that issue. There's a number of other issues that India has to move on in order for a trade deal to be done as well. And what you always see as you get closer to the end of a negotiation is a lot of posturing from governments and excuses. So you could get, an excuse raised about this that's actually covering a different issue. So, for example, it's absolutely critical to the UK that India doesn't have rules that require you, if you're engaged in any type of e-commerce, to localize your data in an Indian server, for example. That will be an absolute red line, I think, for the UK. And that's a big issue for India. So they may be hiding other issues under the sort of purported anger about this one. But she was clearer in what she said than some of the media have reported in sort of general immigration terms.
Who needs who more when it comes to a trade deal between India and the UK?
Well, we will both benefit significantly from it. India's now become the 5th biggest economy in the world. The UK has gone past the UK in that respect. India is also India is at a time of choosing. It needs to make a decision about which side of the table it's going to be on in terms of liberal economic democracies. They buy a lot of weapons from the Russians. They have a relationship with Russia. They're going to have to make some choices there, and this is part of it. So it's very important geopolitically for India to do a deal with the UK. It puts them firmly on one side of the ledger, and India is also very significantly affected by China and by distortions and barriers in China, and this deal would help them. It would help the supply chains orient in such a way that benefited both India and the UK. So there's a lot that India would gain from this.